So we have to know, for those who are tuning in to America's Day at the Races on Wednesday, no, Thursday of this is going to probably air. So like the week before the Breeders' Cup. What happened? What is there a pigeon with Andy? I just saw Andy flipping
Yes,
out.
yes. No, it was Acacia flipping out, actually. Andy was rather cool, calm, and collected. I think mostly by virtue of the fact that he thought it was funny that I was that terrified. So here's the thing, as a lot of people know, like I'm a vegetarian. I am a huge animal lover. Even pigeons, I want them to live their best life. I just want them to do so away from me. And this pigeon was in our indoor studio at Aqueduct and kept like swooping the set or was just like marching around and coming after our cameraman, and it was just freaking me out a bit. So yeah.
Well, I don't do pigeons either, but don't let Andy give you a hard time because he had almost had a panic attack over a bee one time on the
Oh
set
no.
at Saratoga. So he can't say anything about it. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you got to go back to right before the pick six started on Thursday, the week before the Breeders' Cup. You can find it somewhere on YouTube. It's
Yeah.
worth the watch. But I did want to have you here today to talk a little bit about the filly and mare sprint, and we were fortunate enough to see Goodnight Olive up in Saratoga.
Yeah.
Before that race started, I never would have thought that she would have ended up being possibly one of the favorites for the Breeders' Cup filly and mare sprint. Let's start with her since we got to see her at Saratoga. What do you think about Goodnight Olive?
I thought that her ballerina was really impressive. I mean, I really thought that given who she was facing in that race, she was going to be a little bit up against it. But the resume that she's put forth in her last handful of races has been super impressive. I actually remember seeing her at the start of her career when she tasted her first defeat, and she really was kind of an underwhelming type of filly. And she's one that I think has really improved a lot. She's come along. She's obviously coming along at the right time. And the way that she stacked up against her competition, she fit in the ballerina and she was impressive in that race. So I think given the fact that coming out of the ballerina to going into the filly and mare sprint, which is 7 furlongs, which is the distance is a concern for some people too in looking at the filly and mare sprint versus the sprint, which is 6. So I think given the foundation that she has, given what she's done so far, she's a major player in what at the start of the year seemed to be a contentious division, and I think now is pretty wide open.
And I think the conversation goes from a horse who's kind of the nowish horse, and the horse I think is going to get a lot of attention, to a horse that was the champion of this race last year, was Cece, and she hadn't
Mm-hmm.
had. I don't know if she's had an outstanding year, and it's arguable that her years prior have actually been better than her year this year with some of the races that she was able to win. Do you feel like Cece's coming into this the right way off of that last race? It was a pretty easy race. She was 1-5 in there.
Mm-hmm.
Speed figure wasn't as fast as you probably like to see. Do you still think that Cece has a shot at backing up her title?
I think last year in the filly and mare sprint, she ran a tremendous race. She also got a lot of pace to run at, and she sat the right kind of trip when you have the speed that you did in front of her. But she's an incredibly talented horse. That said, I think it's encouraging to see that she got back to the winner's circle last time. Yes, as you said, she was kind of supposed to win because when I saw her up in Saratoga, and I've only had the privilege of seeing her a couple of times, but compared to what I had seen from her prior and in the paddock in Saratoga, she looked dull. She was really, and I talked about this before the race. She really didn't have any spark. She was not showing energy, and that's not typical of Cece. So I don't know if it was traveling. I don't know if it was a tough campaign getting to her. It was the heat. We saw some horses who were really struggling with some of the really hot and humid days we had in Saratoga this summer. So it could have been a number of factors. So I think the fact that she was able to kind of step forward out of that is encouraging. That said, though I won't be there in the paddock, that's something that I'm really going to be looking for from Cece in the Breeders' Cup is to see how she's acting, because I think that that's a pretty telltale sign as far as she's going to show you if she's feeling good and if she's going to run good as a result.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would keep an eye on is I've always remembered Michael McCarthy talking about how Cece kind of likes a tighter racetrack.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, she ran as well as she did at Del Mar, but it was in the fall, so I think it's actually a little tighter in the fall than it
Mm-hmm.
can be in the summer. And I would think that Keeneland, with kind of the cooler weather, and it's supposed to be nice 75, with the cooler
Mm-hmm.
weather, I would imagine that racetrack should be to her liking. So keep an eye out for the times. See if they're coming back a little bit quick. I think the quicker the times are, that means the tighter the racetrack is, which means I think Cece could move up quite a bit there. It's unfortunate. I would love to see Kamari running this race. It sounds like she's going to
Hmm.
run the sprint going 6 furlongs. But there is another horse that I'm very excited about seeing run in here, which is Letruska, who's going to get an opportunity to run a little bit shorter. She hasn't really
Yeah.
been herself. I guess herself being a champion who was outstanding last year. But I'm interested to see how she runs going a little bit shorter.
I am too. And I think it's interesting because when we first saw her coming to the US, the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint was the goal for Fausto Gutierrez. That's why we saw her running against Serengeti Empress up at Saratoga and that just incredible pace duel we saw as a result. And as he started to stretch her out in distances, her speed was so deadly, going a little bit longer. She was able to handle the distance and she just became a monster in the distaff division. And I think it's disappointing, of course, that we didn't get a chance to see her run her race last year in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. I still think the championship honors were so well deserved for the overall campaign of the year that she put together. That said, I do not mind her cutting back at all. She was a horse, again, at the start, this had been the goal, and he thought that this is the way to get him to the Breeders' Cup in the Filly and Mare Sprint. Is she going to still be able to run her A race? I think that's what remains to be seen because she did have such a tough campaign last year and maybe hasn't been able to carry that over to this year. That said, I think that she just adds another interesting layer to what I said is, I think, a really wide open division this year.
You've had a chance to see Letruska quite a bit throughout her
Mm-hmm.
career. I don't know if you were able to see her at Saratoga if you were on at that time, but has she
Yeah.
changed at all physically, or is it just maybe she just last year just took a lot out of her?
She hasn't changed too much physically. She's always a really imposing type. She carries really good weight. She's always a horse that can be a little energetic, a little almost nervous prior to her races. You'll notice that she always paddock schools several times before her race. She never does the post parade. She goes off in the opposite direction. She's accompanied by a pony in the paddock. That's all very typical stuff from her. And even as she's gotten a little bit more mature, they've still kept all of those things in place, which I get. You don't want to mess with it. You don't want your champion to all of a sudden get really nervous and freak out because you didn't bring a pony in the paddock. So I understand keeping all of that. Going into the Breeders' Cup, there were some speculation and some conversation last year about she looking like she had really taken a racetrack with her. And I would completely agree with that. And she did same kind of like the conversation I said with Cece. Before the staff last year, Letruska, her coat didn't look great. Her weight didn't look great. And like I said, she's always one that carries a lot of good weight. She was really sweaty, kind of washed out schooling and prior to the race, which though she's an energetic type, she's not normally like that. This year, she seemed like she was back to her normal self, which was great to see. That said, for a mare in particular, it's tough to keep them at such a high level, running against the best horses in a super competitive division. It's really hard to keep them up at that level. So I don't think you can take anything away from her. What we saw from 2021 was spectacular, and I think we're privileged to have gotten that opportunity. I'm a little concerned that those best races may be behind her.
The last two I wanted to touch on are kind of on two opposite sides of the spectrum. Obligatory, who has been so consistent. She loves the distance. She loves it in Kentucky. This big full field, these races, it feels like this Filly and Mare Sprint can often get chaotic and some horse comes rolling down the middle of the track. It feels like Obligatory could be one of those horses. What do you think about Obligatory's chances in the Filly and Mare Sprint?
I've always been a big fan of her. I mean, if there's some pace to run it, you know that she will be running late. And she was actually my top pick in the ballerina. I thought, she had nearly gotten to Bella Sophia earlier in the year and just had kind of run out of some real estate. I've always felt that 7 furlongs is her ideal distance. She has that big turn of foot. And I think what you said about her races in Kentucky is well meant too. She seems to run her best races there. And yes, she needs some pace to set up and to get the right kind of trip for her. But in these kinds of races and in these kinds of fields, you should get an opportunity to see that. When I had interviewed Bill Mott before the ballerina, it seemed like she was the one that he was highest on. And we'll see if she's going to be able to step forward on the big day.
And then the last one, I think, which is probably the most interesting in this race, outside of Letruska trying something different, but Echo Zulu was brilliant at the beginning of her career. and then she just didn't really turn the corner, as it were, with the kind of the longer distance 3-year-old races. And we saw her with some time off. Now she's back, and she seemed to run well going around one turn last time. Do you predict maybe another step forward from Echo Zulu, or do you think she just needs to kind of find a little bit more to match up with some of these olders?
So far, I think that she needs a little bit of a step forward to stack up with the older fillies and mares that she's going to be facing. That being said, I was really impressed by her last race, and especially given the fact that we didn't get to see her in the Acorn, that she was, as we all know, late scratch on the track. And she was sent to Dr. Brandledge. Nothing serious was found. Given some time, she came back and she won. And I was so excited to see her in the Acorn because I really felt like the shorter distances were actually going to be better for her. So I like that they're keeping her at these sprint distances. She just doesn't look like a horse that wants to go the distance. Yes, I know that she won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies last year. I just think that she was so far heads and tails above her 2-year-old competition. And she was further along mentally and physically. Talent was there, that she was able to overcome something that she really probably didn't want to do. And she actually ran a bang-up race in the Kentucky Oaks too. So I think that she's got a world of talent. We'll see how she stacks up with these older fillies and mares, but I think this is the right place to find out where she stands.
Keisha, if I had to hold your feet to the fire, and I don't like to make people pick one.
Oh.
I let people pick. I let people pick a couple because that's how I play. I play multi-race bets. I don't always have to have one. Sometimes I have two. Sometimes I have three. If you were making a wager, who are one or two of these horses that you wanted to make sure you'd have on your tickets?
I think I always prefer to do these after the draw. But for you, Tori is one that I've been really excited about coming into to the Breeders' Cup. And I really think Goodnight Olive is a huge player. So I'd probably put those as my kind of big two right now. I'll be following really closely, of course, as far as how everybody's training and leading up to it. That's a little dangerous because certain horses get some buzz surrounding them, and we'll see how the draw stacks up. But for me, Obligatory has been the one that I've been most excited about leading into it.
You could have said the all button. I would have let you get away with it.
This is one of those races that I mean, I really think you can make a strong case for pretty much all the horses we talked about.
It creates chaos, and I think the reason it creates chaos is because of what we're seeing. Is you have the younger horses taking on older.
Mm-hmm.
You have cutbacks. You have stretch outs because it being at 7 furlongs. You have horses that excelled going 6, but 7 might be too far. It's always a full field because of the breeding implications of this race. Yep. And that's why I think it's so chaotic at times, and why it can give you a bar of gold and horses like that. So I did give you a hard one to try to pick, but I appreciate you jumping out there. I almost called you Acacia Courtney just because when I asked you for where to send this email, your email is still Courtney, not Clement. So
I know
that almost threw me off, but it didn't. I just go with AC. I just do AC. It's undefeated.
Yeah, ACC, everybody's kind of embraced. So I made Courtney my middle name, so it's not technically wrong. So you're good.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Subscribe, comment, whatever you do on the bottom of these YouTube videos. I don't ever do it because I don't know, but whatever it is, make sure you do it. Thanks so much.